Morality systems in games have been both lauded and ridiculed. They seek to simulate and simplify ethics so there are consequences to your actions, without ruining the fun. It's an aspect of games we haven't got quite right yet, and a paper from Malcolm Ryan and his colleagues at Macquarie University suggests this isn't just a design or storytelling issue, it's a psychological issue too. The paper discovered player behavior can be affected by the mere presence of a morality bar. And even when the player thinks they're ignoring it, altering the meter can alter player behavior. But there is a key to making this work, and I'll let Malcolm Ryan explain.
So I run an annual workshop now called Morality Play. I mean, I could probably name everybody in the world doing this research. There's not like that many of us, and particularly bringing together the moral psychology like we do, and the game design theory and the philosophy. And I was just reviewing a paper on the topic yesterday. Reviewing a paper about Papers, Please. That game's like 10 years old now, but there are so many academic papers about Papers, Please talking about moral engagement. It seems to be the game everybody wants to write about.
It's like meta. It's asking for papers, please.
Yeah. So that was it. There was saying Papers, Please. And everyone's like, oh, right, I should write a paper. It's clearly, So yeah, I'm still pleased that we got in first. So everybody's citing our paper about Papers, Please.
So what can you tell me about the established wisdom and the research that's already been done in the area of morality bars?
There are a number of papers out discussing the effect of morality meters, more or less from a sort of what we would call in academia a close reading of the work. So you play the game, kind of doing a let's play with an academic lens and thinking about what you're doing and what you're feeling as you're going through the game. And so, the player base would often talk about how morality meters detracted from the actual moral decision making, like because it became about playing the meter rather than actually making a moral decision. And, this was reflected in a lot of the academic discussion where they were saying, there's a basis of that in experimental psychology, where you find any activity, once you start rewarding it externally, becomes more about the reward than about the activity itself. And so what we set out to do was, we wanted to get, 200 people to play the game and record their responses in different versions with and without the meter, or with different versions of the meter. In particular, we want to know, do people just blindly obey the meter? Do they use it to influence their decisions? Do they, ignore it completely?
I think a lot of people see like the extrinsic reward as like icing on the cake for the intrinsic reward, but is that like something that a lot of modern games could take note of?
Once people start being motivated by extrinsic rewards, if you take away the extrinsic reward, they stop being motivated to think. And a lot of this comes out of education research, where they're saying, you can get students to do an activity by giving them points, by giving them whatever. But once the points go away, once the rewards go away, people are less motivated to do that than if you never gave them the points at all. And so, what you really want in education is for people to find the intrinsic pleasure in the thing that they're learning about. And so in the same, I think, a lot carries over from educational psychology into video games, because a lot of what we're doing in video games is learning. We're learning to play the game. We're learning to get better at the game and things like that. But if we're rewarding players extrinsically with points, with achievements, with all of that fanfare that we wrap around our games, then at least the psychology would say that people become reliant on those extrinsic rewards to be motivated to do the activity, and lose the actual joy in the task itself. And this is where a lot of the kind of grinding games come about, because there is no intrinsic pleasure in doing the thing. You're just being motivated by extrinsic rewards. And I don't like those games because I know that I will get hooked on the extrinsic rewards, but I'm not actually enjoying the activity itself. And I think that's just lazy design, in my opinion.
And now focusing in more on your study, so can you tell me more about the importance of a player trusting the morality system in a game?
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing. We came in with the hypothesis that the meter as an extrinsic reward for moral behavior, that people would be motivated by to increase their score on the meter and to do as well as possible. Turned out that was less the case than we expected. A lot of people ignored the meter, or at least said that they would ignore the meter. When we ran a focus group where we had people play the game and then talk about each of the decisions and what motivated them. And a lot of people said, oh, no, I didn't look at the meter at all, or, I really didn't care about it. I wanted to make choices based on my own morality. And especially in the cases we had different versions of the meter where sometimes the meter would coincide generally with what you think was good. So, stealing was evil, kicking a dog was evil, saving more people was good and things like that. But sometimes for experiments, we reversed those and said, kicking a dog was good, stealing money from a homeless person was good, just to see, well, how far are people going to go to do the thing that gets them points rather than the thing which is moral. And the encouraging thing to my mind was that people resisted that. People, were able to see that and go, wait, that doesn't make sense. In fact, it was really interesting looking at the very first decision where that was reversed, and the reaction time, the time people took to answer that question. Usually it's a very simple decision and it only takes a fraction of a second to answer that choice. But in the version of the game where it told you that stealing was good, everyone took a lot longer to answer that question. And we don't know exactly what they were doing in that moment, but my hypothesis is that they were going, wait a second, why is the meter telling me that I should steal from this guy? No, that's not right. And that moment of cognitive dissonance, took them out of the game and made them have to think about what they were going to do. But a lot of players at that point then turned off the meter, can't literally turn off the meter, but, we're saying, oh, I'm not going to regard the meter from now on. The meter's lying to me and I'm going to make my own choices. And there were, 10% of players who just did whatever the meter told them. But the majority of players resisted that call of the meter. When they knew something was clearly good, they would do the actually morally good thing rather than the thing the meter told them to do.
People kind of followed the meter until they had a moment where they asked hang on a minute, is this meter messing with me?
Yeah, absolutely. And then they would sort of ignore the meter from then on in. That moment of cognitive dissonance, broke their any effect that the meter had on them from that point. The interesting thing, though, was that so two other interesting results came out of it. We had one choice which was set up as a moral choice, but it really wasn't a moral choice. It was actually just flipping a coin, and you had to call heads or tails. But the meter said, "Oh, heads is good, tails is evil." And at that point, a lot of people did choose the good choice. People chose heads when the meter said heads, and people chose tails when the meter said tails. So there was an indication, at least, even though they were ignoring the meter up to that point, when there were free good points available to them that had no moral effect in the game, people were willing to do the thing the meter advised them to do.
That's so interesting.
So it's interesting that there's still that sense that people want good points. And when we talked to people about it, there was definitely, I didn't want to be entirely evil. And so where there was a chance to grab some free good points, I went for them because there was no moral consequence in my mind. Even when they knew the meter was messing with them, people still didn't want the meter telling them that they were entirely evil. And so would choose to grab, 10 points of good when it was free.
Do you think that's a sign that people are sort of more open to suggestion when all other things are equal?
Yeah, so I mean that was then the third case. So most of the questions we had were what we would call moral temptations, where there was a good thing to do and then there was a self-interested thing to do. And in those cases, people almost always went with the good thing. But of course, not all moral decisions are so clear-cut as this is the good thing and this is the bad thing. So in the moral dilemmas, we got a much bigger mix of responses. Even in the base game without the meter, one of the moral dilemmas, which is a classic sort of trolley problem, do you save 3 lives and sacrifice 1? In the game without a meter, we got a 50-50 split. And so this was a nicely ambiguous moral choice. That it was clear that there was no obvious good answer on that. And so this then became the focus of our study later, and to see, okay, well, does the meter influence that choice? If people generally would be split 50-50, then if we say that one option is good, do we see people siding with what the meter suggested? And the evidence is that yes, when people are faced with this choice between, two sort of equally balanced things, the meter definitely has an effect. People would basically sort of went from 50-50 to more like 70-30. So if the meter said that saving one life was better, then 70% of the people went in that direction. If the meter said that saving 3 lives was better, then 70% of people went in that direction. But this only worked if the meter had been good all the way along. If the meter, like I said, had recommended stealing earlier or recommended kicking a dog, then it had no effect. Then people would go, oh, I'm just ignoring the meter. I'm not paying attention to it. It doesn't have any value to me. We talked to people about why, what was going on in their heads. And the majority of people at this point said, oh, no, I just made the choice that I thought was good. I wasn't influenced by the meter. Now, obviously, the meter was having an effect because, it changed the way that people acted. But what was the origin of the effect? Is it, are people looking at the meter as a source of advice when they're having a difficult moral problem? Are they going, well, the meter suggests that this is the good option. Maybe that's some advice that I could take. Another suggestion from psychology is that, people look for approval, especially, when they're making a moral choice. The meter is approving of their choice or disapproving of their choice. And so if the meter has established itself as an arbiter of good by suggesting, don't steal, don't kick the dog, all of these bad things are evil, then when you come to this choice and it says, well, this choice is good and this choice is evil, then I'm like, well, okay, the meter has been a reliable source of moral advice for me so far. Maybe I should do the thing that it says. Now, it's not like 100%. It's not like, oh yeah, absolutely everybody will do that. There's still 30% of people who will choose to go against the meter. But it is, quite a strong and significant effect that changes the way people act.
How do you think that all comes into play when the players' values are different? Say, for example, if they have political differences, like some players are pro-choice versus pro-life, or some are pro-gun or anti-gun, and it's hard to have a morality system or a morality bar in a game that aligns completely with, what all players might consider true or right.
Yeah, so what I'd be interested to see is getting away from this single-valued good versus evil kind of meter and look how we can diversify that. And the obvious thing that's already going on is in games would be reputation meters, where you have, rather than saying, oh yeah, there's this sort of designer mandated morality of good, that this is a good action, this is an evil action. You look to a game more like Fallout New Vegas, which, doesn't have that classic morality meter. Instead, it says, oh, these people approve of what you did, or these people approve of what you did. And so then the sense of something being good is more involved in the world. A certain group morally approve of you. And then you have to make up your mind whether, do I want to court the moral approval of this group, or am I kind of concerned that, oh, these people think that I'm good, I don't really like those people, maybe that's not something that I want. Similarly, I think there's room for just richer morality meters in themselves. So I was recently talking to the developers of Broken Roads, and they have what they call a moral compass, where morality is then represented as a sort of a number of different moral stances. As you make choices in the game, certain moral choices will earn you points in utilitarianism or points in Machiavellism, or whatever the categories might be. And so then you get to see yourself plotted as sort of, this is your moral philosophy represented on the chart. And you can also then make decisions which, are in line with certain moral philosophies in order to role play particular kind of moral character.
I guess, as society gets more and more divided, having a single morality bar attached to those things is almost a political statement in itself.
I'm quite interested. So we are looking into the use of games for moral education to sort of teach people, not to teach them a moral point of view. Like, we're not trying to promote one particular morality, but from a psychological point of view, there are a set of skills involved in being a moral person that are being able to recognize the moral issues at stake in a situation and being able to reason about them and work out what you think is the right answer. And so we look, I think games are really good at that, what's called moral sensitivity, which is being able to read a situation and see the moral issues at play in a situation. The Garden of Eden quest in Fallout, where you're basically deciding whether to euthanize somebody who asks you for help to kill them. And you can listen to them and their point of view, but you can also go around and talk to a variety of different NPCs. This person is my friend. I don't want them to die. And so you get this sort of different NPCs will be able to give you different points of view. And so I think that's also a valuable way to expand the way we represent morality in games, is by not just sort of presenting you with, again, the good choice, the evil choice, presenting you with a difficult choice and then a variety of different arguments, quite difficult and challenging and, confronting moral problems that make us really think, to sort of weigh up the different arguments rather than just be presented with a single, this is the right thing to do. Do you want to do it? So, I mean, that's well beyond what we're doing in our research, but that's the direction that I want to see go.
You're not going to make the next Witcher 3 with lots of branching storylines?
Yeah, I'll just do that in my spare time.
When I was reading the paper, I was thinking of BioShock with its rewards for potentially harvesting the little girl or saving the little girl. And a lot of people were talking about how those rewards were kind of the same no matter what you did. And also, situations like The Walking Dead where, it wasn't so much a reward as, who you sacrifice. And, a lot of people were talking about it's just a choice between like heartbreaking option A and heartbreaking option B. So do these situations cause players to lose trust in the morality system if it's just kind of the same either way?
I think morality needs to have consequence in, your choices. If you really don't have any skin in the game, then, I mean, so many moral choices in video games, really, you have no skin in the choice at all. Like, the classic one that I think of is in one of the Mass Effects, where you're walking around on the space station and you encounter a couple and they're debating whether or not to have an abortion, I think it is. And they go, "What do you think, Commander Shepard?" And you're like, "Well, I was Commander Shepard." And it's like, why the fuck am I having this conversation?
This is my favorite abortion clinic on the Citadel.
Like, well, it's like, I have no, and I'm just going to go, well, you think you should do that? And then I'll walk away and it'll never occur again. And I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing that you could ever do. Like, I have to ask a question of that magnitude and then to do it in a way that has no ramifications for me. I can just walk away and say, yes, well,
You've never had that happen to you in real life?
No, it happens to me all the time. I walk down the street and people come up to me and ask these things.
I guess we needed an outside person to talk some sense into both of us.
No, never happened to me in real life, strangely enough. I think we do have this urge as game designers to balance our games and to make these choices, allow different pathways, but make them sort of all equally valid. All there's no bad pathway. There's no pathway that's going to really, make the game impossibly hard for the player or things like that. And we need to do that to some degree to make sure the game is always playable. But at the same time, if our choices have no real consequence, then we don't have any stake in the decision. And this is something I felt the Walking Dead did to some degree, because, yes, while you could only save one of these two people, the person that you saved was then part of your story from then on in. And they, I remember when they came back to me and said, "Why did you choose me and not the other person?" And I was like, it was the heat of the moment. I just sort of picked somebody. I didn't, but you had to sort of face the consequences of what you were doing. I think, ideally, yes, that knowledge that, I can see the game doing game thing here. I can see the game being the designer balancing this choice so that I don't really have to pay the cost. That does detract from that, investment in the choice.
It's like the game has to do extra work, isn't it? Because these aren't real people. So extra work has to be done to get you invested in the characters and invested. I guess part one thing the paper reveals is that it's not just the story and the characters that you have to be invested in. It's the system. It's the morality system.
Yeah. So the moral psychology, so there's we to do our research on the basis of one theory of moral psychology, which has what's called the 4-component model, which says that when we're coming to do ethics in the real world, there are sort of 4 general sort of moral systems that are at play in our minds, and so they're moral motivation, moral sensitivity, moral judgment, and moral action. And so moral motivation is exactly that point of, okay, I need to bring my morality to bear on this situation. I need to be concerned about morality here. And, it's not automatic. It's not something that we always have turned on. And there's a lot of evidence that it's very easy to morally detach and to, for whatever reason, to start playing a game or doing something in real life without your moral cognition active. And this is a real problem we face in video games. Is like, there's a very real sense in which making a game of something removes the morality of that situation. We have the expression, you're treating this like a game, by which we mean you're interacting with this in a way that is ignoring the real moral significance of what you're doing. And so that's something we have to face when we're making games where we want players to engage morally. We've got to realize that by making it a game itself, we have already invited a level of moral detachment that we need to overcome. And so, that becomes a problem for us as designers, because it's very easy for players to morally detach and just think of the game as optimizing outcomes and points. We were looking at handedness. It was one thing we did. That was more or less just because I'm working on this study with people from psychology, and they were saying, yeah, it's a thing you have to eliminate, just because if there is a handedness bias. So if you consistently put the good choice on the right, people are more likely to go to the right than the left or something like that. And so to mix it up, we made sure that the choices were reflected around, although they were consistently in one player's playthrough, the good choice would consistently be on one side, because we also wanted players to get used to the idea that, the good choice is on the right, so I will keep going to the right. There may even be some of that in the effect that we have with the morality meter in the dilemma, because players have been going to the right throughout the game, knowing the good choices on the right. So this is something we want to look at next, in fact, is sort of look at how do these interface choices really matter more. But so what we're looking at next is really investigating, a little in more depth, how are these choices being made in the moment? Because the study we're looking at so far really has just looked at what choice people have made and what they said afterwards about what their reasoning was. But of course, people are unreliable about reporting on their own cognition. And so, like I said, people said, I wasn't affected by the meter at all. And yet it's very clear that they were. And so what we need now is more evidence of what was going on in the moment when they were making the decision. Without interrupting the decision, we want to examine what they're doing. And so what we'll be doing next is a study where we'll be recording their mouse movement, and so we can see the pattern of how they move the mouse, and also we'll be using an eye tracker to work out where they're looking on the screen. Some preliminary evidence, just having run a couple of people through, is the eye tracking is very insightful. It shows a lot of what's going on in your head as people look from the choice to the meter, and then look at the other choice on the meter, and then look back, and then go look, and then you can see the cogs turning in people's heads through the way that they look around the screen.
What do you think the main takeaways for developers would be designing a morality bar system? It seems like, there's a hierarchy where at the top, the players are fully invested. They see the meter as a moral guide. It aligns with their values. It's multidimensional. Somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy is, they're just acting instrumentally. They see it as a system to be gamed. They're min-maxing. And at the bottom, they just don't care about it at all. They reject it and they're indifferent to it.
Yeah, so we saw all of these patterns between different players, and to my mind, if I was designing the game, I would really want that level of the meter being there as a moral as a guide to moral play, as a way for the player to get more invested in the morality of the game rather than less. In order to achieve that, the things the morality meter needs to do is to coincide with the player's morality, because as soon as that breaks, and as soon as the meter is telling the player, no, this is the good thing, and it conflicts with the player's own morality, our evidence is that they will disengage with the meter and with that part of the gameplay. At the same time, we also want to avoid, like you said, that instrumental play where people are just playing the meter for the points rather than for the actual moral engagement. In terms of the design space, that's where I'm interested in going next, after we've completed these sort of biometric studies to see how players engage with the meter. I'm really interested in more subtle versions of the meter that promote different kinds of moral exploration.
My thanks to Malcolm Ryan, and I'm going to link the study as well as the game below, The Great Fire, in case you want to check it out. Thanks for watching and listening, everyone.